Hey everyone, today I am back in Lost Ark with another roster update video. Today we're going to be talking about Energy Overflow Soulfist. Now, if you remember back a couple of months ago, I did a video series where I talked about all of the classes in my main roster for Lost Ark, and Soul Eater was a class that I was looking to replace because I just wasn't really enjoying her playstyle that much anymore in Tier 4. Felt a bit too rigid, a bit clunky with how she did her damage, and a lot of the boss fights were just kind of designed against her, or at least that's what it felt like to me. So with the Power Pass and Express event that we had a couple of months ago, I was looking for something to replace her, and well, Energy Overflow Soulfist ended up being that replacement. Her playstyle changed quite a bit going into Tier 4, mostly because of the addition of the 4th node on the Enlightenment tree, which I'll talk about in a bit. And she is kind of the exact opposite of Soul Eater. She's got a very flexible rotation. There are a couple of cool tricks that you can do with her hype management, which is her identity gauge, and which is also what kind of controls the flow of your rotation as well. There's a couple of tricks that you can do there, playing around downtime, playing around, like for example, having to force out your rotation faster, or playing around your awakening, or playing around a stagger check. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with it. It does take a bit of getting used to. There is definitely some frustration with some of these things as well, like you reach the pinnacle of your damage dealing capabilities in Hype 3 and then the boss goes away for a few seconds and then you just lose out on half of your damage. That can feel kind of bad. For example, all of your damage skills, there's only one of them that has paralysis immunity, and the other 5 damage skills that you have do not have any protection against push, or just like the boss looking in your direction and just like blowing on you and you just fall over. So there's definitely a lot of things to kind of learn with this class, like learning when to use your paralysis, shifting around skills in your damage rotation, hyping at the right time so that you can kind of use your push immunity from the identity gauge activation to kind of tank through a hit as well. There's definitely a lot of things to kind of get used to on this class, but after having played it for a couple of months now, and after having finally gotten to the point where I feel like I'm actually doing damage on the class now, because I felt like I did Z on her for so long, but now for the last like 2 to 3 weeks I want to say, she finally feels like an actual strong character, like I've always heard Soulfist to be, and I'm having a lot of fun on her right now as well. She's definitely become one of my favorite characters to play. Still, a lot of high highs and a lot of low lows, like when everything lines up together and I just get to wail on the boss with all my skills. She feels incredible to play, but then there are always those moments where I go into Hype 3, I press my damage buff, and the boss just fucks off, and then I just kind of die inside because there's no real way to properly recover from that outside of doing a slightly weaker Hype 3 rotation, or just turning off Hype altogether and hoping that by the time the boss comes back, you have your identity back as well to kind of start again from zero. But yeah, that's basically a little TLDR of how I felt about Soulfist so far. Let's then talk about how she actually plays. So we're here in Trixion. Let's quickly go over her skills, kind of talk about the rotation, and then also kind of like showcase some neat little tricks that you can do with it as well. So for our skills, I'll just kind of go down the list as we get them. Our Awakening is a very powerful hitting ability, but it's also got the downside of taking an incredibly long time to cast. As you can see, it takes about 5 seconds to throw this thing out, which is of course a very long duration where the boss could decide to just run away. Our T skill, however, is a bit faster to cast. We jump in the air, we jump on the boss, and there we go. My abilities are also a little bit slower because I am running mass increase on this, because I have that at Relic already, because I shared it across a bunch of classes. So I'm running mass increase on my Soulfist, which is not the meta build, but it kind of works for me. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm going with. Then we have our Gap Closer. This is on my Q button. This has 3 charges, and the added benefit is that it also gives a stacking damage buff. When you've stacked it all the way up, it gives about 45% attack power for 3 seconds. It's a very short duration, but it's exactly what we need to kind of get a mini rotation out during our downtime. Then we've got Energy Release. This is our damage buff, and the cool thing about this is that it does have push immunity on it, one of the very few skills that actually has some sort of protection against getting pushed around by the boss. Then we've got Lightning Palm. This is our counter skill, and the cool thing about this counter is that it actually has a very low cooldown, so we can use it once in Hype 0, we go into Hype 1, we can use it again, Hype 2, use it again, hype 3, use it again. So while we are going through our damage rotation, this thing has a very high uptime. So if you know a counter is coming, you can just hold on to it a little bit, push it back in your damage rotation, and then just use it to counter the boss. Or if you know you have enough time to kind of push out your hype 2 rotation, for example, and then know that you'll have it back in hype 3 for when you need it, you can kind of play around that as well. So really cool. Then we got Force Orb. This shoots out 3 orbs, and you of course want to try and land all 3 on the boss so that it does more damage, because if you only land the one, then it doesn't really do that much damage. Also, every orb has its own instance of stagger damage, so if you land all 3, you can actually do a lot of stagger damage with this. And again, this is a very low cooldown ability, so it does mean that as you go through the levels of hype, you can just spam this out quite rapidly as well. Then we've got Illusion Strike. This is a ranged skill that we can throw out, and then the skill just kind of does its damage while we can do other things. We've got Shadow Breaker. This is a very close range skill, so you do really need to get all the way up into the boss's ass to use that one. And we got Merciless Pummel. This is another skill for which we need to be fairly close. And then we've got Celestial Palm. This is another ranged skill. So we do have some ranged options on this class between throwing out Illusion Strike and our Celestial Palm. We don't need to hug the boss for that, but then for these 2 skills, we do need to make sure that we are quite close. These 3 skills, Lightning Palm, Shadow Breaker, and Merciless Pummel, all have back attack modifiers as well. So if you can hit them from the back, they will do a bit more damage and also have a higher crit rate. Now, the big thing to then talk about is our hype gauge, our identity gauge. This has 3 stages. Right now we are in, well, stage 0, I guess you could say, hype 0. Then we can go into level 1, which you can see with like a little glowing aura. We go into hype 2, for which we're a bit stronger again. And then in hype 3, we are really strong, and this also drains quite fast. Now, hype is going to do a couple things for us. First of all, it gives us a damage buff and a cooldown reduction buff. This cooldown reduction buff means, like, for example, you get your cooldowns back faster. It doesn't give you like active cooldown, it gives you a cooldown where whenever you use a skill in hype 3, it's gonna come back faster. So if I, for example, use Yara Awakening in hype 0, you can see 4 minutes before I'm gonna get it back, or well, technically 5 minutes, but it shows 4 minutes over here. However, if I go into hype 3 and I now throw my Awakening, you can see it's only 3 minutes on the cooldown, because it's only like 3.5 minutes or something that I actually have on it, because hype 3 gives me that strong cooldown reduction buff. Now, on top of that, because in, of course, tier 4, we have this node over here on our enlightenment tree, every time that we go up 1 level of hype, it not only consumes all of our energy, but 1, but it also gives us a 10-second flat cooldown reduction, excluding the Hyper Awakening technique and, of course, our normal Awakening. So Awakening and T-skill are not affected by that, but the rest of our skills are, and this means that as soon as we press hype 1, we are just going to be doing a lot of damage, because we get to push out a lot of skills, and our little passive of Energy Overflow, which means that if we are below 30% energy, we deal bonus damage, will always activate as well, because as soon as I press the button, as you can see, my energy just goes to 1, and every time I keep pressing that button, it just keeps going back down to 1, so that keeps our energy low for the bonus damage that we get from our little class engraving as well. So the rotation then looks a little bit like this. You can stack up your adrenaline by just using your gap closer. You go hype 1, damage buff, some skills, hype 2, you do the rest of your skills from your rotation. Then we go hype 3, damage buff, and then we throw out all of our skills inside the hype 3 window. Also use your T skill, of course. And then we turn off our gauge manually because our skills are gone, and then we refund our gauge a bit faster as well. While we are in this cooldown phase, we can also just use our gap closer 3 times and do a mini rotation with a couple of our damage skills. Doesn't do that much, but some damage is still better than none. And then, of course, once our skills are back, we can go ahead and start our rotation again. Or, well, when our identity gauge has refunded itself, I should say. So here we finish, and then we just turn off our identity gauge. We get a little refund from our arc passive. Then we can use a gap closer 3 times. Again, do a mini rotation with our 3 skills. Just enough to fit inside the 3-second rotation. Or 3-second buff, I should say. And then when our identity gauge has finished its cooldown, we can just go straight back into doing damage. And then that is kind of what the rotation looks like for Energy Overflow Soulfist. Now, there are still Two cool things that you can do with your identity gauge as well, as I mentioned before, playing around a stagger check, for example. So one of the things about your hype gauge is that the higher the level of hype you stop in, the longer the cooldown is gonna be. So if I exit out of hype 1, you can see that this refills incredibly fast. If I exit out of hype 2, it refunds a little bit slower, and then hype 3 of course has that much slower cooldown. However, we can abuse this hype 1 to kind of do a lot of stagger damage. So we can do a couple of stagger skills right here. Hype 1, turn it off. Throw out our stagger skills, hype 1, turn it off. Throw out some stagger skills, hype 1, turn it off. And as you can see, I am just constantly hitting the boss with skills to just kind of help with the stagger check. And then when the stagger check is done, turn on hype 1 and I can just immediately go to my rotation as if nothing happened. So this is really nice where you get to just full on play super selfless, throw everything that you have into a stagger check that has damage reduction, and you don't lose out on anything because you get to just turn on hype 1, you get the cooldown reduction, and everything is ready again. The only thing you need to pay attention to is that you don't use energy release. Like, this thing has a 30-second cooldown at base. It's got about 25 seconds when you use it in hype 0. So you don't really want to use that, because then going into hype 1, it's like, oh, I still have some cooldown on it, that's not good. And then you refund the gauge again, you need to wait, and now you can use it. So while the stagger check is going on, don't use energy release. But if you keep that ready, then literally as soon as the stagger check is done, you turn on hype, and you just get to go straight into your rotation. Another cool thing that you can do with this is playing around your awakening. Of course, you want to throw out your awakening in hype 3. That's where it's going to do the most damage. That's also where it gets that biggest cooldown refund because of the cooldown reduction buff that hype 3 gives us. However, the problem is, this takes about 5 seconds to throw out. Our energy release buff only lasts for 6 seconds. So basically, as soon as our awakening hits the boss, energy release is gonna time out, and we're in hype 3, and we have 7 other skills to use. Well, unfortunately enough, we can't use energy release again because it's still on cooldown. Well, that is where we can kind of abuse our hype toggling as well. We go into hype 1, we press energy release, we hype to hype 3, we now throw out our awakening while being buffed by energy release, while being buffed by hype 3, and because of going into hype 2 and then hype 3, our energy release buff is back, so that we can just immediately go into hitting on the boss. The only thing that you're gonna get with this is that you have a slightly longer cooldown period because we exited hype at a later stage. This again has to do with something in our Ark passive. So that's a little trick you can do with your awakening. You go into hype 1, damage buff, 2, 3, throw your awakening, and then as soon as your awakening is done, you can damage buff again, and then just go straight into doing your rotation. So that's pretty much what the gameplay of Overflow Soulfist is like. Let's then quickly go over the build. So for gear, we are going to be running the critical set. There is an argument to be made to run master set instead and then just do some shenanigans with your Ark passive and your engravings. But the standard build is to run critical set. Honestly, I would recommend you to do this as well. Engravings look like this. Precise dagger is kind of a must on this class. The general build runs keen blunt instead of mass increase, but because I have mass increase at level 3 already, it's going to be much more damage for me. And then I'm also not having to play around the negative of keen blunt, where you sometimes just deal 20% less damage with your skills. So for me personally, this worked out a bit better. Mass increase can also be negated by running feast and then Peto wine as well. And your hype also gives you an attack speed buff. So when you're outside of hype, you're gonna feel it, but inside hype 1, which you've spent barely no time in, you don't feel it as much, and as soon as you're in hype 2, you don't even realize mass increase is on anymore. So that's why I am running it like that. For gems, we basically run damaging cooldown on all of our damage skills, except Force Orb. That one just gets a damage buff, and Illusion Strike just gets a damage gem as well. And then Energy Release, we run a cooldown gem. For the Ark passive then, over here in the evolution tree, we go full spec with some crit. We take 2 points into Limit Break and 1 into Keen Sense, but because I have a bracelet with 5% crit on it as an extra line, I'm running it like this, but the general build runs 1 point into Keen Sense, 2 points in Zealous Might, and then we have Standing Striker. Enlightenment goes straight down, and then 2 points into Recoil Control. This is what is going to give you that refund when you exit your hype gauge. So that is why when we are done with our rotation in hype 3, we just turn off hype immediately so that we get a bigger refund with this. This also means that if we ever get more Enlightenment points to spend, that this is just going to make the gameplay feel so much better, because the more points you can put into this, the shorter the cooldown is going to be on your recovery phase. So if you get this to like level 5, your recovery phase is going to be so short that you can barely get out like that mini rotation of 4 skills in there. So hopefully at some point we get more enlightenment points, and then this class is going to feel so much better to play. Last but not least, we have the leap tree. I'm currently running it like this, but you can change things up a little bit. Like for example, with Kazeros, I've heard it's a pretty long fight. You can probably take the points out of Transcendent Power, put them into energy release potential for the cooldown reduction. You could also decide to run 5 points into this, and then maybe take this node, as this one gives you an attack speed buff. So instead of getting attack speed from here, you're getting attack speed from this node. So it kind of depends on what you want to run. I'm personally liking it like this right now, because that way the fights are usually short enough so that the Transcendent Power makes more sense. And then we still get the cast speed over here with the bigger damage node on the T skill. But if I'm not running the attack speed here, I kind of like having the attack speed from this. So if I were to do like a Guardian raid, I'd probably run it like this, because your T skill is probably not gonna contribute as much, as the Guardian raid is kind of short. But yeah, that's kind of like how I enjoy running it right now. Then for the engravings, I already talked about that. So then we have our skills, Flash Step. These are the tripods. Energy Release, our big damage buff. Make sure you take the Tenacity tripod. You can also take a Purification one, which can be nice support for your team, but honestly, take this. The push immunity is so nice on it. Lightning Palm, which is your counter. You can run Burning Hands. This gives it a burn, which lasts for 5 seconds. But the burn does not stack, so if you use it back to back real quick, then you're going to lose out on some damage on it. And just the extra range on it is really nice, as it's a quite short ranged ability. It is your counter, so being able to counter from a bit further away is really nice. Then I'm running Force Orb. These are the tripods. If you want to replace the stagger value from this for weak point, you can run Tempest Blast instead. But I like running Force Orb, as it gives some more APM. You can use this in all stages of hype, whereas Tempest Blast only gets used in Hype 3, so that's why I like Force Orb over that. Illusion Strike, Shadow Breaker, Merciless Pummel, and then of course Celestial Palm as the last one. And I think that covers just about everything. So Soulfist is a pretty fun class to play. It's taken me a little while to kind of get used to her playstyle, the little quirks about the identity management as well. But now that I've kind of gotten used to it, it feels very satisfying. It's really nice how you just get to play around stagger checks, be very selfless, throw everything in there to help your team the best as possible without losing out on anything for yourself. Playing around certain downtimes, like if you see that the boss only has like 5 seconds left before he goes away, you just cut your rotation short, go straight into Hype 3, throw out whatever damage you still can. For example, playing around with your Awakening as well, like just being able to shorten your rotation. There's a lot of cool things that you can do on this class. The downside is of course that there's also a lot of things that are quite negative for her. If you press Energy Release and the boss goes away for even 2 or 3 seconds, you lose out on half of your rotation. If, for example, you go into Hype 3 and the boss just goes away, you lose out on half of your damage again as well. If the boss decides to do some annoying attack patterns that keep hitting you, you don't really have any paralysis skills to kind of tank through those attacks, so you really need to make sure that you dodge everything that the boss is doing as well. So there are definitely a lot of downsides to playing Soulfist as well, and which is why it's not really a class I would recommend for like a new player, especially not EO. Like I know that Robust Spirit has more push immunity and paralysis skills, but EO doesn't really have any. Like as I mentioned, only 1 out of 6 of your basic damage skills has paralysis on it. The other 5 have nothing to protect you against those kind of pushes from the boss. So there's definitely some learning curve involved there, both for playing the class, but also just for like playing in all of the different raids. Like knowing your way around the patterns is quite important to not lose out on too much damage. But once you kind of master this class, it becomes really fun to play. I am personally still very far from mastering it myself, but I'm already at a point where she has become very enjoyable to me, and I just look forward to raiding on her every week, get better at it, and just kind of see where the future will lead with how good I can maybe get on this class. But that's gonna do it for me, so I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.